Until March, I had never been on a cruise, but 6 months later, I had spent 31 days at sea on 3 completely different sailings: a Caribbean, a transatlantic, and an Alaskan sailing. The biggest thing I learned is that most first-time cruise tips aren't completely false, they're just given without context. So this is what I wish someone had told me before my first cruise, especially if you want a 5-star experience on a 1-star budget.
Tip number 1, stop asking which cruise line is best. The first question should not be which cruise line do I choose, it should be what job do I want this cruise to perform? So Carson, you had 3 cruises this year with totally different formats on totally different ships. Why don't you break them down for us, starting with the Caribbean sailing first?
Yeah, so that was my first cruise ever. It was on the NCL Aqua on a 7-day Caribbean sailing. Now, that format, I would call it the resort format because the ship is part of the destination. You know, you're going there to see all the islands and stuff, but you're also going there to enjoy the amenities of the ship, like the water slides or the pools, stuff like that.
Every ship is a part of the destination, but the Aqua was brand new when we sailed her, unlike the next trip that we did, which was on the
MSC Divina, which was built in 2012. So it was a huge departure from the Aqua, which was built in 2025. Now, we took the Divina from Miami to Rome, and it was 15 days. I would say that format is the journey. Now, obviously, the ship is part of the destination because you're there at sea for so long, but it's also you're there to enjoy the journey of crossing the Atlantic Ocean, going to a different country, going to all these cities on the way, like Barcelona or Cannes, stuff like that.
Another big part of it, though, is that you can't use a lot of those water slides and activities when you're doing a transatlantic. Well, on the Aqua, but the Divina was nice that they had the indoor pool, which was really cool to see.
Yeah, and then I will say the last thing about the ship for the transatlantic is that unlike the Caribbean sailing on the Aqua, where there was a lot of outward-facing stuff, like the promenade deck, or I forget what they call it on the Aqua.
Waterfront.
The waterfront, which has all the hot tubs and restaurants. The Divina didn't really have anything like that. It was all inward-facing, which was nice because usually transatlantics are in the spring and the fall, and it can get a little bit cold.
So the next ship and the itinerary were an odd combination of both the Caribbean sailing and the transatlantic sailing in like a weird way.
Yeah, so that was our Alaskan sailing, 9 days on the NCL Joy. And I would call this format the itinerary format because it is really focused on the itinerary, going to Glacier Bay, the ports you're going to stop at, stuff like that. But it was also a mix-up of a little bit of the Caribbean sailing and the transatlantic because we were on an NCL ship, Breakaway Plus class. They still had the waterfront stuff, which was nice because you got to experience Alaska from the outside of the ship rather than looking through a window from the inside of the ship. Okay, so just as a quick recap, the 3 formats are the resort, the journey, and the itinerary. The Caribbean sailing was the resort sailing, the transatlantic was the journey, and the Alaskan sailing was the itinerary.
Tip number 2 is that your first cruise doesn't necessarily need to be short. Now, this is one I see people make the mistake of all the time because not only are 3 or 4 day sailings way cheaper, but they're just less of a commitment up front. Now, the problem with this is a 3 or 4 day sailing from Galveston or from Mobile, Alabama or from Miami looks a lot different in terms of experience than a transatlantic or a 9-day Alaskan. Everything about that trip is going to be very different, and it might lead you to hating a cruise when actually you just picked the wrong sailing.
Yeah, so I would start with at least 7 days. I really enjoyed the 7-day Caribbean sailing we did just because it gave me time to settle into the cruise and actually enjoy the ports. You know, especially if you have a shorter sailing, you're gonna feel rushed to do stuff. You're gonna feel rushed to experience the ships. You're gonna feel rushed to experience the ports. And that might not necessarily be what every cruise is like. After that, I did a 15-day transatlantic, and I think I enjoyed that more because it gave me more time to do all of that. So a 7-day is really good to just test the waters, try things out without feeling rushed rather than a 3 or 4 day sailing.
One question, a lot of people that are first-time cruisers that might be watching, they might wonder, like, was the transatlantic, was any one of them more rough than the other? The ships were almost very similar in size, like from 140,000 gross tons all the way to 170. Did you notice a big difference crossing the Atlantic versus bouncing around the Caribbean?
Honestly, I would say the transatlantic was probably the worst because it was the smallest ship, but with a big caveat. It was only bad when we were in the Caribbean because we left from Miami. It was the worst on day 2 or 3 when we were around BVI. That's when it was bad. But the Atlantic was fine. Like, I don't even think we really felt the waves during the actual crossing part.
The irony was that we actually were just on the Aqua like 30 days before in the BVI area, and we also had rough seas.
Yeah.
So it's not really about the ship being too bad. I think you have to watch your alcohol intake, because sometimes you might think that you're feeling seasick when you're just free at seasick. Tip number 3 is that more days can actually end up costing less, but only if you run the actual math.
So this is another benefit of not taking a short cruise. You know, a short cruise might be a cheaper overall price, but when you break it out per day, it's not really that cheap. You're already paying for your flights, your transportation, whatever, to get to and from the cruise port. Why not spend less money per day and have a longer vacation?
Now, this is a reason I love repositioning cruises, transatlantics, transpacifics, because the ship already needs to move for dry dock or to be in a different market. They just want to fill the ship and make any money that they can. They're not necessarily looking to make $100 a day. Sometimes the ships will be happy if they can make $25, $30 a day for an inside room just to move the ship around. And so that's why I enjoy those. You can still see beautiful ports, you get to move a little bit slower, and you're getting 1 to 3 days in the price that it would cost you for 1 day in the Caribbean sailing.
Yeah, but I will say the caveat with a repositioning cruise is that they're not round trip cruises, they're one way. So that means you do have to find transportation from your departure port and from your arrival port. The math kind of works out the same too if you're someone who likes packages such as the drinks, internet, or spa package. So again, the total will probably be more for a longer cruise, but it'll break out to be cheaper per day than a shorter cruise.
The thing with this though is if you're doing a transatlantic or a longer cruise, you probably don't want the drinks package. There's no reason on a 15-day sailing that you need to have 4 drinks every day. So you might just find yourself in a situation where you're like, I'll want a glass of wine here or there. I might want to use the internet this day, and I might want to read a book and go to the pool or the hot tub on this day. And so you can find ways of not having to get sucked into the package cycle and still have a really great trip.
And then the last thing I'll mention while we're on the topic of price is if you have a friend that's been on a bunch of cruises like Perry has, maybe you could take your first cruise with them because number one, they're already experienced on cruises and how they operate. Number two, they might have status with that cruise line and you get perks by staying in the same stateroom with them. Another thing is that some cruise lines, like MSC, will status match to not just other cruise lines, but other status programs like hotels or airlines.
Tip number 4 is that a shore excursion should solve a problem. So Carson, when should people book and not book a shore excursion?
So I will say I've never booked any shore excursions on any of the 3 of my sailings I've done this year. But I'll come back to that because not booking one on the Caribbean sailing was a little bit of a mistake. When you shouldn't book, though, is something like Alaska. Now, we did a whole video on how to experience Alaska without paying anything for shore excursions. But I would say going to Alaska for your first time, you don't want to book excursions because they cause you to speed up and rush and not really enjoy the moment. And when you don't book excursions, that causes you to slow down, really enjoy the moment, enjoy the experience of being at the destination, enjoy your vacation. Now, going back to what I said earlier about the Caribbean sailing, I would book an excursion if there's no reliable transportation to get to where you want to go, or if it's something that's hard to manage by yourself. And we made this mistake in the Caribbean. I was trying to go to some waterfalls in the Dominican Republic, but the taxis there are a little expensive and are known for leaving people behind at the destination and then charging double to bring them back to the cruise ship. So I would definitely book an excursion there if I wanted to do those waterfalls again, because we didn't get to do them. I would also book an excursion if you're in a sketchy city. Barcelona is not necessarily dangerous, but it can be known as sketchy. There's pickpockets, stuff like that. If you just don't want to go out alone, you can book an excursion so that way you're with a group of people.
Barcelona is actually another good example because the pier is really long. Carson and I had some calories to burn that day, and so it was actually my birthday, so I didn't mind walking around at all. Just to get off of the pier at a port like Barcelona, it was like a mile and a half, and that didn't even bring you to the city, that just brought you to the end of the pier. And so you'll want to think about those things when you're booking. Also, we do love the cruise lines. The cruise lines do make a lot of money through shore excursions, and that's because they operate as a middleman. Now, if you want to remove the middleman, there is a site called Viator, or there are other third parties that you can go with that provide literally sometimes the same exact shore excursion without paying that middleman fee that MSC, Carnival, Royal all take. And so that could be a good option, just keep in mind. They don't necessarily guarantee that you're gonna be back on time, and so if you miss the ship, you're ship out of luck. So tip number 5, the final tip. You've been literally all over the world on cruise ships at this point, like 0 to 100, right? Like in February, March, you had been on 0, and now you spent over a month on cruise ships. What do you think, having traveled all different seasons, all different locations, all over the world, what would you tell someone that's going for a cruise for their first time?
I would probably say the most important thing is to slow down and enjoy your vacation and not get sucked into the trap of I need to get my money's worth. Especially if you buy any packages, you don't want to get sucked into doing the calculations of how many drinks you need to drink per day to get your money's worth, or how many hours you need to spend watching Netflix to get your money's worth with the Wi-Fi package. So I would say the most important thing is to slow down, enjoy the ship, enjoy your vacation, enjoy the destinations.
What would you say is the number one cruise ship do? Like the thing that people should do if they go on a cruise?
I would say the number one thing that people should do is actually experience the ship. I see a lot of people that will just stay in their stateroom all day watching YouTube or Netflix or reading a book. So the number one thing that I would tell someone to do is go out and go to the theater shows, go to the activities, play some of the trivia shows, just experience the ship.
To the same effect, what is the number one don't do, aside from falling overboard?
I would say don't get sucked into spending money on packages and excursions and then be worried about trying to get your money's worth the whole cruise. It's similar to what I said before. Spend money on things that actually matter rather than just spending money because you think you might miss out on it when you're on the ship.
What cruise do you think offered the best value?
I would have to say the transatlantic, just because it was really cheap. We got transportation to Europe. We were on the ship for 15 days. All our meals were included. And we got to go to so many different locations I had never been before.
Which cruise taught you the most?
Probably the first one, the Caribbean one. It just taught me to slow down, enjoy the moment, not try to get your money's worth, not sit inside your stateroom all day.
Which type of cruise would you most recommend to a first-timer?
Honestly, it's a bit confusing because if I were talking to myself, I would tell myself the Alaskan one, but for the broad majority of people, I would probably say the Caribbean, just because you don't feel like you have to get off the ship to experience every port, and also there were less ports on our specific sailing than there were on the Alaskan trip, so you have more sea days to relax and enjoy the ship.
What would you skip next time?
So I know I just told everybody that first-timers should take a Caribbean cruise, but I would say I would skip the Caribbean cruise. I feel like the Eastern Caribbean is all very similar. Once you've experienced some of the islands, you've experienced a lot of them. And also, I would say the transatlantic and Alaska were a lot more fun, and the destinations were better.
So last question, what was the single biggest surprise of the 31 days that you spent cruising this year?
The biggest surprise was probably finding out how good of a value cruises are for the cost. And that really aligns with the 5-star experience on a 1-star budget, because you're really paying so little to get so much. You get your food included, you get your room, you get the gym, you get the amenities of the ship, and you get the destinations too, and you get to go out and explore.
So going back over all of the advice that you gave to first-timers and looking at the tips that you gave, the 5 tips, it sounds like what you're saying is some cruises are about the ship, some cruises are about the itinerary, some cruises are about finding yourself or like finding a routine because they're so long and it's not about the ship or the itinerary, transatlantic.
And I would say these are good tips that I wish I had known before I went on my first cruise, but not everybody is the same. I would just find the cruise line that's right for you, find the ship that's right for you, find the itinerary that you actually want to go on, and then once you get on the ship, slow down and enjoy your vacation rather than rushing around and trying to get your money's worth.
Let us know what you thought of these 5 tips, and if there's any that you think would be more helpful for first-time cruisers, put those in the comments below.
And if you like this video, hit the like and subscribe button and sign up for our newsletter in the description below. And if you want to check out any of the 3 cruises I've been on this year, we have videos on all 3 on our channel, and they'll be on the screen now. We'll see you guys in the next one. God bless.